You're listening to Life is Long Talk. Once again, we've transformed our popular webinar into an audio experience with generative AI as your guide. Get ready, because this time we're exploring Autophagy and Awa Bancha. A scientist unlocks the potential of Japan's traditional fermented tea.
Welcome back. So today we're taking a really interesting path, I think. We're connecting some very advanced cell biology, the science behind longevity, with traditional Japanese culture. And this all stems from some really eye-opening research presented recently.
That's right. And our mission today, it's pretty clear. We want to dig into this fundamental process of cell repair, autophagy, and then explore this really compelling evidence that a somewhat obscure unique fermented tea called Awabancha, from Tokushima specifically, might be one of the most powerful natural activators of autophagy found so far.
Okay, let's dive right in at the cellular level then. We often talk about the body having, 37 trillion cells all constantly working. But the core problem driving aging and disease, it isn't just cells dying off, right? It's more about the junk building up inside them. Precisely, yeah. Think of a healthy cell, like a bustling, efficient city. You've got the mitochondria as power plants, proteins doing all sorts of specialized jobs, transport systems. It's complex. But just like a city, it produces waste constantly. And if that waste management system breaks down, well, the whole city starts to suffer.
Right, things grind to a halt. And that failure, that breakdown in waste management, that brings us to autophagy. You mentioned it's a system, not like a specific part. How does this cleaning system actually operate in that tiny cellular world?
Okay, so autophagy literally translates to self-eating. It sounds a bit dramatic, but it's essentially the cell's internal process for collecting unwanted stuff, old or damaged components, proteins that aren't working right anymore, and then trucking it over to the cell's recycling center, which is called the lysosome. It's basically the ultimate cellular sustainability program.
And when this junk gets to the lysosome, it's not just incinerated or dumped.
No, not at all. That's the really elegant part. Let's say the collected item is a damaged protein. Inside the lysosome, powerful enzymes dismantle it completely, breaking it down into its fundamental building blocks, amino acids.
Right.
These amino acids, they're immediately put back into circulation, ready to be used to build brand new functional proteins. It's incredibly efficient, essentially 100% reuse.
Wow.
Yeah. To visualize it, researchers often use the analogy of the autophagosome. That's the structure that does the collecting. They describe it like Pac-Man. It's like a membrane bubble that forms inside the cell, gobbles up the target, maybe an old mitochondrion that's not producing energy well, and then ferries it off for breakdown and reuse.
Pac-Man inside the cell, I like that. So, okay, this recycling system is clearly vital. What are its two sort of main functions that are so critical for keeping us healthy longer?
Well, the first big one is what we could call continuous cellular renewal. In Japanese, there's a great term, shinshin taisha, which means ongoing metabolism or renewal. This isn't about replacing entire cells all the time, like skin shedding, but refreshing the contents within each cell.
Oh, okay.
Think of it like maintaining a car. If you replace just a few % of its parts every single day, a spark plug here, a filter there, that car would essentially stay new indefinitely. Our cells try to do this constantly, replacing internal components daily. If autophagy stops, this renewal halts, and research clearly shows that in lab models, this inevitably leads to sickness and, well, premature death.
So constant internal housekeeping.
Yeah.
And the second function, you mentioned it's more like a security force.
Exactly, yeah. The second role is targeted toxin removal. Autophagy is smart. It can identify and specifically eliminate harmful invaders. This includes things like certain bacteria, salmonella is a classic example, and viruses. So it's actually a key part of our immune defense. And crucially, it also goes after those dangerous clumps of misfolded proteins, protein aggregates that build up and are known to cause devastating neurodegenerative diseases, things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Autophagy can clear these out before they really take hold. It even removes damaged mitochondria, which can become toxic if left unchecked.
This really touches on that bigger question, doesn't it? Is aging actually programmed, or is it more like a failure of maintenance? We hear about these outliers, like the naked mole rat living 30 years practically cancer-free, or that Turritopsis jellyfish that can supposedly revert to a younger state. It suggests aging isn't just about time passing. So what's the specific breakdown in our cellular maintenance?
Well, we know for a fact that autophagy function naturally declines as we age. It happens across pretty much all species studied. And recently, researchers pinpointed a key player in this decline, a protein called Rubicon.
Rubicon, like crossing the Rubicon.
It's exactly that kind of significance, yeah. Rubicon essentially acts like a brake pedal for the autophagy process. And the problem is, as we get older, the levels of this Rubicon protein tend to abnormally increase. pressing down on that brake and slowing the whole cellular cleaning process.
Ah, so we have a mechanism, a specific brake being applied too hard. So the obvious question then is, what happens if you release the brake? Did they test that?
They did, and the results are really quite striking. They used C. elegans, tiny worms that are a common model in aging research. When they genetically eliminated Rubicon in these worms, essentially taking the foot off the brake, their lifespan increased by about 1.2 times, so 20% longer.
Okay, longer life, but was it healthy life?
That's the key point. It wasn't just lifespan. They saw a significant suppression of age-related diseases or declines. For instance, older worms normally become quite sluggish. Their movement slows way down.
Yeah.
But the worms without Rubicon, they maintained vigorous active movement much later into their lives. It suggests they weren't just living longer, they were staying functionally younger for longer.
That's the real goal, isn't it? Extending health span, not just lifespan. Keeping people functional and disease-free for more of their lives. Because for many, there's a big gap between total years lived and healthy years lived. So if boosting autophagy is key, how do we actually do that?
And, well, that brings us neatly, if unexpectedly, to this traditional Japanese tea, Awabancha.
Right. Now, most people know green tea, black tea, maybe oolong. You mentioned Awabancha is different. How is its fermentation process distinct from those common teas?
That's a great question because the terminology can be confusing. Usually when we talk about tea fermentation, like in black tea, we're actually talking about enzyme-driven oxidation that happens within the tea leaf itself after it's picked and processed.
Okay.
Awabancha is in a totally different category. It's called a post-fermented tea, or kohaku-cha in Japanese. And here, the fermentation is driven entirely by external microbes, specifically lactic acid bacteria. It's much more akin to how you make things like miso, sauerkraut, or even some types of pickles. Microbial action is key.
So it's really a different beast altogether. Tell us a bit about its background.
Absolutely. It's fascinating stuff. This tea has been made for, well, possibly over 1,000 years, mainly in the rather remote mountainous areas of Tokushima Prefecture on Shikoku Island. And the process itself is unique. They don't use the young, delicate spring buds like most high-end teas. They use large, tough, fully mature leaves harvested in the summer.
Mature leaves. That's unusual.
Very. And the process involves first boiling these leaves, which is also uncommon for tea production, then vigorously kneading and rubbing them. After that, they're packed down and undergo this specific lactic acid fermentation for about 2 weeks or so.
And I imagine using those mature boiled leaves changes the final tea's chemistry quite a bit.
It certainly does. Because they use mature leaves and boil them, Awabancha is naturally quite low in catechins, the antioxidants people often associate with green tea, and also low in caffeine. But interestingly, it's quite high in certain amino acids, particularly glutamic acid and aspartic acid. And traditionally, people in the region have claimed it helps with things like managing blood sugar, improving gut health, maybe even easing allergy symptoms. Anecdotal, of course, but persistent claims.
So we have this very regional, quite unusual tea with a long history. How on earth did scientists connect this specific tea to, a Nobel Prize-winning cellular process like autophagy?
It actually came out of a really ambitious screening project. Researchers were systematically testing a huge number of traditional Japanese health foods, I think over 500 different items. They were specifically looking for natural compounds that could activate autophagy in the cell cultures. And Awabancha didn't just pop up. The signals were apparently extremely strong.
Extremely strong. Okay, let's get into the specifics then. What did they actually see in the lab test that got them so excited, beyond just seeing activation in a dish?
Well, the cell culture results were definitely promising, showing it suppressed cellular aging markers and even slowed the proliferation of some cancer cell lines. But I think the most dramatic, almost startling finding was again in the C. elegans worms.
The words again.
Yes, they took worms that were naturally aged, meaning they were already old, moving slowly, showing signs of decline. When they treated these already aged worms with an extract of Awabancha, they observed a kind of functional restoration. The old sluggish worms started moving vigorously again, almost like younger worms. It wasn't just slowing aging, it looked like a degree of rejuvenation.
Wow, okay. Reversing decline in worms is pretty impressive. And I understand they compared its potency to something well-known in the longevity field. You mentioned rapamycin earlier.
Right. Rapamycin is a really important benchmark. It started life as an immunosuppressant drug, but then scientists discovered it's also one of the most potent pharmaceutical activators of autophagy known. It's widely used in research labs to extend lifespan in various animal models. It's basically the gold standard for chemical autophagy activation.
So how did the tea stack up?
This is the kicker. The Awabancha extract, in their tests, showed higher autophagy activation activity than rapamycin itself.
Higher than the pharmaceutical gold standard.
Higher, yeah. Which is, frankly, a massive finding for a traditional naturally fermented tea. It really makes you rethink where potent bioactives might be found.
Absolutely. That's quite something. It immediately begs the question, though, what in the tea is doing this? Is it one specific magic molecule, or is it something about the whole package?
That is the multi-million-dollar question right now, and it's under intense investigation. The researchers suspect it's likely a synergistic effect, multiple compounds working together. They did note that this strong effect seems quite specific to Awabancha, made using the traditional Tokushima method. They tested other post-fermented teas, even similar ones, and didn't see the same level of activation.
So it's the whole process, the leaves, the boiling, the bacteria.
It seems very likely. That unique combination, the mature leaves, the boiling step perhaps breaking down cell walls differently, the specific mix of lactic acid bacteria involved in that particular fermentation process seems crucial to producing whatever compound or combination of compounds is responsible for this potent effect.
And this isn't just staying as a lab curiosity, right? I heard they're actually moving this towards human studies, even involving something like the XPI.
That's correct. The research group is involved in the global XPI's health span competition, which has this incredibly ambitious target of demonstrating interventions that can achieve potentially 10 years or more of rejuvenation in humans within a few years.
10 years of rejuvenation.
Yeah, it's aiming high.
Yeah.
And as part of that effort, they are currently running clinical trials. They've recruited, I believe, 20 volunteers, and they're testing a combination approach, giving them the Awabancha extract alongside comprehensive lifestyle changes, focusing particularly on tailored exercise programs and optimizing sleep.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. What's the big takeaway for someone listening to this? We started with this core idea. Our health, our aging process, it's fundamentally managed down at the cellular level by this cleaning system, Autpphagy. And now it seems this traditional tea, Awabancha, isn't just folk medicine. It's emerging as a scientifically validated, potentially very potent natural tool to boost that system, maybe even stronger than existing drugs.
That seems to be the implication, yes. Boost this natural maintenance system, and you might significantly impact health span. And Awabancha looks like a promising natural way to do that. Of course, a common question we get is, okay, great, but how do I know if my autophagy is actually working better? Since it's all happening invisibly inside your cells, you can't directly feel it turn on. You can't sense Rubicon levels changing or Pac-Man getting busier.
Right, you can't feel your cells cleaning house.
Exactly. Measuring it accurately right now is still quite complex, usually involving specialized analysis of certain blood cells. However, there's a lot of work, including major government-funded projects happening right now to develop much simpler, accessible tests, potentially using standard blood samples or even urine, that could one day allow people to routinely monitor their cellular autophagy levels. That could be a game changer for personalized health.
Being able to track your cellular cleanliness. That would be incredible. Okay, so finally, let's leave our listeners with a practical thought, something to chew on based on all this. We know things like aerobic exercise generally support autophagy, but here is a potential conflict. Intense weightlifting or resistance training, especially when combined with high protein intake right after, which many people do to build muscle, that combination is actually known to temporarily suppress autophagy. The body switches priorities from recycling to building.
That's a known tension, yes.
Yeah.
Anabolic building signals tend to dampen catabolic breaking down recycling signals like autophagy.
So the provocative thought is this. If you're serious about fitness, aiming for both muscle gain and optimal long-term cellular health, how might you strategically time your workouts, your nutrition, especially your protein intake, to get the benefits of both? How do you periodize your day or week to allow for both the building phase and the essential cellular cleanup phase? That's a fascinating optimization puzzle to consider in light of this research.